He's a veteran that served in Iraq, a passionate anarcho-capitalist, and the leading libertarian candidate for president in 2020. Adam Kokesh, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, brother. Appreciate it.
You say like communities can, the individuals and communities, they can decide to create whatever government they want on a local level. But if, in addition to the wealth inequality, there's a property, land inequality.
No, that's a big one. That's a big one, and I'm glad you brought it up because this gets to the heart of what is legitimate.
Let me just finish this. So how do you have a say in a community if you don't own a damn thing in the community?
Yeah, that's absolutely critical to this because right now there are a lot of illegitimate property claims. I mean, the main was the federal government itself claims to own a huge amount of land mass in the United States. In Western states, you know, more than in Eastern states, it's more than 50% in a lot. And that land belongs to no one and should be available for anyone to claim, to homestead, to claim a part of their share of equitable access to natural resources. So in this process of localizing government, there is going to be a casting away of unjust property claims. And again, I cannot promise because I think we need to go one step at a time. I cannot promise how it's going to end up in each state. But I know that if we get rid of the federal government, that at very least states will be able to do a much better job of allocating land property to serve the needs of their people than the federal government, which really just sequesters it from use, allows pollution to happen at an unprecedented scale. The biggest polluter in the world, of course, being the United States military. And in some ways, they hurt what should be, people's right to graze cattle, like in the case of the Bundys. But in many cases, what they do is they stifle economic development and appropriate use of that land to meet human needs, to produce food that would make food so much cheaper. And instead, they go and subsidize corn and GMO corn and corn syrup, and then that's poisoning and creating all the problems with I'm sure you're familiar with all the ways the food supply is polluted by GMOs and corn syrup and all sorts of other manufactured products. So if you get the federal government out of land management, at very least land management will be done on a much more equitable, intelligent level. In the ideal that I see, when government is localized all the way down to the community, you will have the ability of that community to say, you know what, this corporation that got this huge land grant here, we're not going to recognize it because it came from the federal government, and we declare this land open for homesteading. This is now claimed by the people of this community, or at least it can be repurposed for something that is much more in line with the needs of that community.
So you're saying once the federal government is eliminated, individuals of a community can identify land of a corporation that they don't think is legitimately owned and just and repossess it, basically, is what you're saying?
Well, all property, inherent to the libertarian philosophy is that self-ownership, right? And this kind of goes back to the Lockean concept of property, that when you mix your labor with natural resources, it has a piece of you in it and you have a claim to ownership of it. But there's a subjective element to this. And I would argue that your body isn't really subjective, right? That you definitely own the wholeness of your body. But any property external to your body, there's somewhat of a subjective element to, how much is respected, right? So if I go and I put up a fence around 1 million acres in Montana and say, this is all mine, most people would be like, that's not really, you're not really using all of that. We don't really respect that. But if I put up a fence around 10 acres, as I have in Arizona, and say, this is my fair share right now in this area where no land is really being developed, I'm taking 10 acres for myself as my claim for an individual homestead, that's respected. So in that sense, ultimately, all property, while it has this core irrefutable foundation of your right to own property, when it comes to land and larger things and things that have lots of other conflating factors, property is very much largely by consent of the market, by consent of the community. And right now that's perverted by government. So yes, it would be entirely appropriate for a community-based organization to repossess property that they deem that they do not respect somebody else's claims to. Again, I think this is much less important when it comes to the money and the buildings and things like that. But when it comes to land, yes, it's very important that we free up land for equitable human development.
But if you eliminate the federal government, you still have the state governments that are going to say,
like I said,
you can't take this land, and you're still going to have the corporations that can hire private security, just like they do now to keep you off it. So I don't see how it's just
the first big step. It's just the first big step because, like I said, then you go from the states down to the counties, and then you're going to see the real good stuff happening at that point. I mean, it's kind of like a two-step process here. Like let's cut the head off the snake. Let's get rid of this big, disgusting, destructive layer of fat at the top, and what that's going to do is give us so much momentum downwards, decentralizing, and it's sort of like you let things stabilize at the state levels, and everybody can breathe, and we readjust, and we go, wow, we get used to life being so much better, and then we can go, all right, now how do we want to proceed from here? And then there's that phase of getting it down to the county level, and again, I think it's at the county level where you're going to see that transition happen. I think you're going to see law enforcement agencies start to consolidate at the county level. You're going to see them transition to more service-based organizations. You're going to see, with the elimination of the drug war, a huge reduction in crime and poverty and all the things that go along with that. With the elimination of the monetary system, at least as a centrally controlled thing, you get rid of all of the debt and the debt slavery. And, you want to talk about wage slavery, that's a huge part of it, because a lot of those wage slaves that you mentioned, you kind of left out the part about the manipulated housing market and the market for auto loans. Those are the two big financial items in people's lives, I suppose, other than kids, right? And all of those things, the cost is driven way up and is grossly perverted by the central economic control that the federal government makes possible.
Just one thought is, I think it's appealing to a lot of people, the idea of, well, say we kind of have a feudalistic society, right? And you want to kind of cut the king out of the picture. Is that accurate?
Sure. It's a fair analogy.
Okay. And I guess my concern is that I'm not so confident things would change so much for the peasants if they still have the lords, who are working for the king.
Well, when you just do the math, already it gets so much better. Just eliminating the burden. What was the last time a state government just lost $6 trillion? No, that was the Department of Defense.
Yes, no, that is.
Just look at the scale. Just look at the scale of government waste. There is this ridiculous amount. It's not around state governments. Yes, state governments are just as evil, but not nearly on the same scale of wealth destruction as the federal government.
Now, when I was saying, I guess my main argument this whole time is the authority of government. Sure, it can be abusive. Sure, it's imperfect. Sure, it's tyrannical in a sense, but it's at least somewhat accountable, but only somewhat. Unfortunately, maybe we can make that better. Obviously, the fact that the Pentagon can account for trillions of dollars, that's proof that they're not entirely accountable. And we need to fix that somehow. I think maybe we can I hope we can fix that without eliminating it completely. Because businesses are not accountable in the same way. Like, we can't file a Freedom of Information Act on a business. Not that, again, not that government's so great at coming through with those.
You can't walk away from government.
Yeah,
that's what makes it coercive.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I say businesses are also coercive and not a better situation is because they're also coercive. They can be just as coercive because if they can, control the resource, they're just as capable of putting a fence around the land and the resources and hiring a private army.
The enforcers of those illegitimate property claims are always government agents with guns.
Not entirely. I gave you the example with standing rock.
Yes, you have private security. Okay, state, no, but I'm saying state as well, but even private security.
It is both.
It is because their property rights claims are recognized by government and backed up by the bigger gang of thugs.
Let's see. Do you have any last thoughts? Make your closing statements. You know where I kind of disagree, where I'm still not entirely convinced. Make your closing argument.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity very much. It's been a lot of fun. This is a conversation that definitely needs to be had, and I'm really excited that I'm able to have this kind of engagement with you so early on in my presidential campaign, which is just picking up steam incredibly at this point. I've been blown away with the momentum that we've been able to pick up since announcing just a few weeks ago, and I feel like I'm a year ahead of schedule. That we're getting so many Americans now, and partly with your help here today, to consider the idea of how much better off we would be if we eliminated the federal government. And this is, like I said, our disagreements are the kind that we can work out by living in different communities. You know, you get to have your community where you organize however you want, voluntarily, on whatever scale you want. Maybe you want to go live in a city where everything that you envision government is doing. As long as I get to have my 10 acres and you leave me alone and you don't try to steal from me to support your system in a community where I don't live, hey, we can all get along. Again, this is the everybody gets what they want strategy. What we're arguing about here, now some of our argument was about the transition, but I think we can agree in the general goodness of localizing power, of getting it down to the community. And at that point, it's like, oh, well, we can agree to disagree. Everybody gets what they want when they are empowered at the community level to have what they want. And everybody has the option to opt out or create their new community. So the first step, and this is what we're seeing, is uniting Americans around the idea of localization, is eliminating the federal government in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner. We used to say that I'm running for not president because it's more accurate to say that we're turning it into a referendum, right? That this is the first time in American history the U.S. presidential election has been a real choice for the American people. You can vote for more of the same from the old parties, or you can vote nobody for president. You can vote for freedom, at least for the first major step in localizing power, ultimately down to you, the divine individual. And that's really where humanity is going right now. That is the great course that we see ahead of us at this point in our history. And it is just such an honor. It is so beautiful to be alive at this point in human history and get to participate in this, to have some say in at least the shape of human destiny right now, because obviously where we are as a society, where we are with technology is way ahead of where government is, and it is holding us back. It is an evil institution that the sooner we get rid of, the better. So if you want to help take this first step with me to help America once again, as we did in the first American Revolution, overthrow the greatest empire the world has ever known, please join us at thefreedomline.com. That's my website. It's 3 words, thefreedomline.com. And from there, you can find kokeshforpresident.com. Please join our email list, check out the platform, and help us get this question in front of the American people, because this is an idea whose time has come. The sooner we can implement it, the better off we'll be, the less people will suffer under the current regime.
Adam, I really enjoy hearing your ideas. I'm still not convinced that removing government and leaving us just with businesses makes a better situation for people. But we have so much goddamn common ground. Ending the drug wars, ending unjust foreign wars.
Yes.
Thank you, Adam Kokesh, for joining me. Please hit the like button, leave a comment. Thanks for watching.
Matt Orfalia, I guess that's how you pronounce it.
YouTuber Matt Orfalia.
The YouTuber named Matt Orfala.
Wow, somebody knows me.
Absolutely, baby. We watch your videos, we make them go viral.
Is education a crime?
People were enjoying it.
All right, let's walk out here.